In the dim light outside a bustling bar, a group of people silently looked at each other with extremely tense expressions. Suddenly, the blind man in the group walked away in a hurry. Just a few seconds later, a dark shadow shot up the wall and landed on the stairs with extraordinary strength. Unexpectedly, this powerful super soldier was the weak blind man from earlier. Thanks to his super sensitive hearing, he quickly located the target and rushed straight down from the edge of the building. With his weapon ready in hand, at this moment, a gunshot suddenly rang out. His companion was shot once in the heart. Seeing her friend collapse on the spot, a woman next to her screamed in pain. The shooter was a crazy assassin known by the nickname Poindexter. He had extremely accurate sniper skills. Realizing the abnormality from the screams, Daredevil immediately returned. This time, Daredevil kicked the killer away in time before he could kill his remaining friend. A fierce battle broke out between the two super soldiers, Daredevil and Poindexter. The bar became a chaotic battlefield. The two super soldiers fought from one place to another. Both Daredevil and Poindexter were seriously injured. Daredevil fought the assassin while listening to Nelson's heartbeat. Daredevil grabbed Poindexter's neck and threw powerful punches. Then Daredevil pinned his head down. At that moment, Nelson's heart officially stopped beating. A painful scream rang out in the cold night. Helpless and angry, Daredevil pushed Poindexter down. There were no words to describe Daredevil's current pain. His chest felt like it was being squeezed and his mind was spinning. Daredevil took off his mask. Cherry was standing far away and witnessed everything. Now he knew Daredevil's true identity. The silent hero who has been protecting Hell's Kitchen all this time turns out to be Matt, the blind lawyer. A year has passed quickly. Matt has now given up his Daredevil identity to devote all his efforts to his own company. He also has the support of two new partners. One is a former prosecutor named Kirsten, and the other is a former investigator named Cherry. Poindexter, although pushed from the top floor by Matt, miraculously survived. However, Matt still maintains his belief in justice. Matt sues Poindexter in court. With excellent reasoning, Matt makes Poindexter suffer the appropriate punishment. As a result, Poindexter is sentenced to life in prison without parole, but it seems that this is still too light a punishment compared to what he has caused. Nelson's death not only makes Matt extremely miserable, but it also leaves an incurable wound in Karen's heart. Karen decides to leave New York and move to another city to live. Since then, Matt and Karen have gradually become distant. In another development, the underworld in Hell's Kitchen is now managed and operated by Vanessa. The business at Red Hook Court is going extremely well, thereby earning huge profits for the 5 gangs under Vanessa's control. After dozens of events, Wilson has finally officially returned, but Wilson's return is not to take away Vanessa's current position because he is aiming for something new, the mayor's seat of New York City. Strangely, the people in the city love Wilson very much. However, there are those who support him, and there are those who oppose him. Many people think that letting a violent criminal like Wilson do politics is a big mistake, but on the contrary, the supporters believe that violence is the only way to control violence. They expect the new mayor Wilson to restore peace to New York City. Entering the political arena, Wilson recruited 3 strong associates for his campaign. The first was Sheila. She had worked for previous mayors. With her extensive experience, she would support and advise Wilson in every step. Next was Buck, Wilson's absolutely loyal subordinate. Unlike Sheila, who still believed that Wilson was a potential leader, Buck saw through Wilson's true face behind his polite appearance. Daniel was a crazy fan of Wilson. He helped Wilson get a series of signatures at an extremely low cost. Every word he uttered showed his loyalty to the new mayor. As for Matt, after a long period of depression, he finally had a little joy. Matt dated psychologist Heather with Kirsten's encouragement, but that joy did not last long because that night he saw Wilson on the news. Wilson talked non-stop about the special policies he would enact if elected. Wilson said that he would reform everything to make New York great again. Wilson also promised to ensure peace for the people at night, but the most notable is the policy of eliminating superheroes in the city. Wilson believes that masked heroes are no different from criminals. They use the excuse of enforcing justice to commit terrible crimes on the streets. Not to mention that superheroes also contribute to spreading violent ideology to minors. Matt understands Wilson too well. Wilson is the crime boss Kingpin and will always be Kingpin. But now that Matt has given up the identity of Daredevil, he wants nothing to do with Wilson. A few days later, Matt still decides to meet Wilson. However, this meeting only serves to reinforce their common view that they have nothing to do with each other. If Wilson does not cross the line, and if Matt does not return to being Daredevil, they guarantee that they will never confront each other. And then, what must come will come. That night, when Matt was walking down the street with Heather, he received news that Wilson was elected mayor of New York. Wilson made a very clear new policy that he would completely eliminate superheroes and restore a great New York. At the same time, at the party, Wilson Wilson also revealed to Vanessa that he knew about her affair with Adam, but with his undying love for Vanessa, Wilson promised her that he would change. Wilson promised not to kill Adam. In another development, Hector had just gone down to the subway station when he suddenly saw a young man being beaten. As usual, Hector rushed in to stop him. Hector held back 2 thugs to help the young man escape. One thug missed Hector and slipped and fell onto the subway tracks. At this point, the remaining thug pulled out a gun and said he was a New York police officer. Hector was immediately arrested for the extremely serious crime of murdering a police officer. No lawyer wanted to get involved in this case except Matt. The police were beating Hector in the interrogation room. Coincidentally, Matt was nearby. Thanks to his super hearing, Matt easily heard everything that happened, so he immediately stepped into the room. At the same time, he listened to Hector's story. Based on his special perception, Matt knew for sure that Hector was telling the truth, so Matt decided to defend Hector. Of course, Matt's 2 colleagues would not be happy to know that he was participating in this case, because it was an extremely difficult case. Matt doing so was no different from confronting the entire New York Police Department, but Matt had promised Hector, so they were forced to do as he said. Although Matt knew Hector was not lying, he still felt that Hector was hiding something. Kirsten and Cherry's mission was to investigate Hector's true identity. Matt's intuition was correct. During the investigation, Cherry discovered a horrifying thing. Hector was White Tiger, the knight who protected the city after Daredevil disappeared. In order not to negatively affect the defense, Matt convinced the judge that Hector's identity needed to be kept secret so that they could ensure fairness in the trial. Therefore, the judge forbade the police attorney from revealing Hector's true identity. On the other hand, Wilson was meeting Benny's niece. BB is a talented young journalist with great prestige in society. She revealed to Wilson that Carlo, a prestigious police commissioner in New York, was about to resign. Carlo had publicly opposed Jack's appointment as mayor, and if he resigned, hundreds of loyal policemen would also resign. The loss of a large number of policemen in this situation would give the heroes more credibility with the people. If they felt that Wilson's new policy was redundant, his position would also be affected. So Wilson immediately went to see Commissioner Carlo, but before Wilson could say anything, Carlo exposed him. Carlo said that he knew Wilson's true character, a madman who was willing to give up the criminal empire to manipulate the New York machine. To Carlo, a thug would always be a thug, and his goal was to make Wilson the mayor. With the shortest term in office in history, Carlo started by resigning and followed a series of officers to resign. But Carlo had forgotten that Wilson was a very cunning person. Wilson investigated Carlo and knew about his hometown. Through this, the nephew that Carlo was trying to hide was discovered by Wilson. Wilson used Carlo's nephew's life to force Carlo to continue serving under him. There was no other way but for Carlo to obey. However, Carlo was still patiently waiting for the opportunity to take down Wilson. After dealing with this, Wilson began to try to mend his relationship with his wife Vanessa. He and she went to Heather's psychotherapy room. Wilson and his wife began to tell the whole truth. They told Heather why they had become so distant and what could help their relationship return to the way it was. Vanessa admitted that her father was a gambler and an alcoholic, and that he often abandoned her and her mother. That made them suffer and ask many unanswered questions. The trauma of her childhood made Vanessa suspicious of Wilson. She thought her husband would not return, so during Wilson's absence, she had an affair with another man. Wilson was heartbroken when he heard this. Although he knew that he was partly at fault, he could not forgive his wife's betrayal. Back to Matt, the talented lawyer. His target now was Taurus, the young man who was rescued by Hector at the subway station. Matt was watching Taurus from afar when he suddenly heard the voices of 2 policemen. They were planning to kill someone to cover up the clues. Without hesitation, Matt ran to Taurus's door. Matt asked Taurus to quickly escape before the 2 policemen appeared. When the 2 policemen opened the door and entered, they were extremely angry. They realized that Taurus had successfully escaped, and only Matt was left with an extremely hateful smile. The 2 policemen immediately rushed in and beat Matt up. On their arms, they also had a skull tattooed as the symbol of the Punisher. Matt still did not fight back until they tried to kill him to cover up the evidence. Matt had no choice but to fight back. Matt beat them up to teach them a lesson. One of the 2 policemen who visited Matt last night was Powell, the policeman who survived the fight with White Tiger at the subway station. Powell brought his swollen eyes to Matt. Powell was extremely angry but could not do anything to Matt because he knew that if he continued to touch this lawyer, he would be beaten more severely. In court, Powell testified that when he and his partner were patrolling the subway station, Hector suddenly attacked. Even though Powell showed his police badge and advised him, Hector still did not stop. Powell also said that Hector intentionally threw my partner onto the tracks when he knew a train was coming. After listening, Matt did not refute but only asked Powell about about Torres. According to Matt, Torres was the one who provided confidential information to Powell and his partner. Powell was scared when he heard that, but he kept calm and replied that he had never heard that name. When Matt returned to his seat, he suddenly heard a policeman say that Torres would definitely not be able to testify in court. At the same time, the dirty police were surrounding Torres's hideout. Right after Cherry put Torres in the car, they turned on the siren to prevent Torres from going to court. But the police did not expect that everything had been predicted by Matt. Matt cooperated with Cherry to distract the bad police. Although Torres arrived in time to attend the trial, due to the terrible pressure from the police, he eventually denied that Hector had saved him in front of the judge. This put Matt at a disadvantage, and he was forced to withdraw the witness. To turn defeat into victory, Matt had no choice but to reveal Hector's true identity, which was the White Tiger Knight. This made the judge extremely surprised. This information was made public, and we had to wait and see whether it would benefit or harm Hector. In the following trials, people who had been helped by White Tiger came to court one by one as witnesses. These testimonies were more prestigious than the statements of the police who had been helped by Hector. This not only gained the sympathy of the people, but also the trust of the jury, and a miracle really happened. Hector was declared innocent by the jury and was officially released. Before parting, Matt advised Hector to give up his identity as White Tiger to take care of his family, but he still refused to listen. That night, as usual, Hector continued to wear a white suit to prepare to carry out justice. But before he could help someone, he was suddenly shot dead by a killer wearing a skull shirt. The culprit then quickly disappeared into the darkness. Meanwhile, the tension between Wilson and Vanessa continued to increase. The reason was that the conflict between the two criminal gangs under Vanessa was getting out of control. But unlike Vanessa's proposal for reconciliation, Wilson wanted to let the two gangs destroy each other. However, Vanessa was in a different position at this time. She refused to listen to Wilson's advice. Vanessa secretly gave Buck a large sum of money. Then she told him to compensate Victor, the victim in the dispute, to resolve the conflict. This debt was immediately transferred to Luca. That is, Luca owed Wilson $1.8 million. Knowing this, Wilson was not angry but gently reminded his wife. He said he respected his wife, but she had to know that sometimes peace needed to be broken. The moment of chaos was also the moment when a new order was born. Back to Hector's death. This not only affected Matt a lot, it also made Angela, White Tiger's niece, despair. Angela completely lost faith in New York, an unjust and deceitful city, with criminals everywhere, and the police being all bastards. Witnessing this heartbreaking scene, Matt questioned himself whether it was right for him to give up his identity as Daredevil. Worse still, Matt increasingly lost faith in the legal system. A homeless man was imprisoned for stealing a few bags of popcorn. According to the man, he was only a few days away from registering for benefits at the Social Security office, and if he died, he would have to reincarnate to be able to apply for benefits again. Even though it was just a few food stamps, it helped him get through his hunger. Without them, he would have to eat leftovers from the trash in the supermarket. Not only Matt, Wilson is also having some difficulties with his position as mayor. The process is complicated, and the procedures are troublesome. He has to go through many departments, and he even has to wait for the review board to implement policy. On top of that, Wilson always has to be friendly and polite in front of everyone. In addition, Daniel accidentally revealed some of Wilson's plans to the female journalist Bebe Waldrop. Based on that, Bebe secretly published an article denouncing Wilson as a bad market. Wilson is abusing his power to manipulate the New York system. As usual, Wilson summoned all the staff to his private room. Then he shouted loudly with an angry face, asking who leaked the information to the outside. He also vowed to punish that person. However, when he knew that person was Daniel, Wilson was not as cruel as the previous people. Perhaps Daniel's absolute loyalty touched Wilson's frozen heart. Wilson not only forgave him, but also created conditions for Daniel to start over. At this time, Matt still hadn't forgotten about Hector's heartbreaking incident. The blind lawyer secretly went to the scene to investigate the remaining evidence here. As a result, Matt found a bullet engraved with a skull. Matt immediately knew who he had to go to for answers. Matt went deep into an old basement and met Frank again. When Matt questioned Frank about the bullet, he immediately realized that the culprit was a retributionist fanatic. This time, the situation seemed even more serious when one of them was a police officer. Matt looked at the weapons and asked Frank why he didn't use his perfect skills to save people. Frank replied frankly that he didn't have time to be a hero like Matt. Matt always talked about helping people, but in the end, he still couldn't protect his best friend. Frank actually had to live in pain for not being able to protect his son, but the way they solved it was the opposite. Frank did not run away like Matt, but decided to take revenge. Frank was sure that if Matt continued to hide from his identity as Daredevil, he would only live in pain. Matt tried to explain that he had let the law punish Poindexter Poindexter. But Frank immediately retorted that Poindexter was alive. The truth was that Nelson was still dead. If that was really the justice that Matt talked about, he should look back at his own patheticness. After that meeting, Matt began to show signs of finding himself again. He climbed to the top floor. There was Daredevil's storage room. Matt practiced with special weapons. Wilson was like Matt in that he still could not deny his true self. After a while, Wilson tried to forgive Vanessa, but could not. So he started to find the old excitement again. He built a luxurious basement just for his pleasure. His simple pleasures were eating expensive food and listening to Adam's screams of begging. A few days later, Matt went to the bank to borrow a large sum of money for his company. Matt was greeted by a middle-aged assistant manager. He was very sad to say that Matt's company did not qualify for the loan. Matt was in debt, but he was still willing to accept customers who were in financial difficulty, typically White Tiger. Although that was very nice, rules were rules. Banks could not lend money to customers who could not pay. Matt had just left the bank when a group of robbers suddenly broke in. The leader of this robbery was Devlin, Luca's loyal subordinate. They were aiming for a precious diamond kept in the bank to have money to pay Wilson. At the same time, Matt was calling his female colleague to complain when he suddenly heard screaming in the bank. So he told his colleague to call 911, and he immediately returned to the bank. At this time, all the customers and employees were gathered in the main hall by the robbers. Matt walked in with the appearance of a blind lawyer who knew nothing. They put Matt in the row of 5 hostages without knowing that this was a big mistake. Thanks to his sensitive ears, Matt could hear the entire plan of the robbers. Because the bank manager was not there, the assistant was immediately targeted by Devlin. Devlin forced him to open the vault or he would be shot. But an assistant like him had no right to know the password. Matt knew that, so he told the assistant to try to prolong the time as much as possible. He would take care of the rest. At the same time, the police arrived quickly, beyond the robbers' expectations. So Plan B was deployed. Devlin focused on negotiations with the police outside. He will leave the rest to his subordinates to handle. Matt was just waiting for that. Matt took advantage of the moment when the assistant was prolonging his time in the basement to ask to go to the toilet. The red hat guy was partly kind and partly subjective, so he agreed to take Matt to the toilet. The moment he entered the deserted place, Matt immediately took action. Matt listened to the assistant's situation in the basement. When he heard his screams of pleading, Matt immediately ran to the treasury to rescue him. The assistant urged Matt to run away quickly, but Matt refused. Matt had to get Precious Diamond inside the treasury because it was the only thing that could help him negotiate with the terrorists to save the lives of the hostages. After listening, the assistant just laughed sarcastically and said that he didn't know the password, but Matt was still expecting him to open the treasury. Matt said that I didn't tell you to open the vault. Matt put his ear close to the iron door and focused on the sound of the lock. Compared to his skill, Matt successfully unlocked the lock. There were hundreds of deposit boxes inside the vault. It was extremely difficult to find the diamond. Matt thought for a moment and suddenly realized that the robbers definitely knew which box it was in. Sure enough, there was a locker key in the robber's pocket, but the numbers on the key were almost all blurred. The assistant had to search every single box in the area. The situation outside was very tense. The police were in such a hurry that the robbers gradually lost their composure. The tense atmosphere also affects the assistant. Matt saw this and comforted himself that everything would be fine. Matt was sure that he would be reunited with his family. After a while, the two finally found the precious diamond. However, the police outside were starting to lose patience. They were about to rush in to control the robbers. Knowing this, Matt sped up the pace. Matt suddenly appeared in front of Devlin and talked nonsense to stall for time. The moment the door was broken, Matt threw the diamond into the air and quickly hid behind the smoke. After catching the diamond, Devlin put it in a bag and quickly disguised himself as a police officer. Devlin took advantage of the chaos to sneak out, but he could not have imagined that all his actions could not escape Matt's ears. Matt followed Devlin and then beat this bastard up. After everything was over, Matt met his assistant again. The relationship between the two was better than before. He promised to find a way to increase Matt's company's profits. Matt also quietly returned the diamond to the bank. Due to the failure of the bank robbery, Luca could not pay the $1.8 million owed to Wilson, so Luca decided to go to the mayor's office to threaten Wilson. Luca said that Wilson was no longer as strong as before. Therefore, Wilson was no longer qualified to participate in the mafia war. After hearing this, Wilson could only laugh sarcastically and replied that the deadline was still the same, but the debt increased from $1.8 to $2.8 million. At the same time, New York City was facing a new danger. A serial killer calling himself Muse had murdered more than 60 victims by draining their blood. Even more horrifying, Muse had mixed blood into a bucket of paint and painted it all over the walls of New York. More than 60 people died, and the culprit had not been caught, making Wilson extremely angry. He cursed the police as useless and started to build a separate task force. All the agents here were thugs or deserters. They might have the power, but they had no morals. Wilson allowed the task force to operate as they pleased, as long as they had to capture Muse for him. On this side, Angela, Hector's niece, was equally angry. Muse was the last target that White Tiger was determined to pursue. Angela investigated and discovered his hiding place. Angela brought the file to the lawyer to ask him to arrest Muse. However, Matt refused because he thought that arresting criminals was the job of the police. After hearing that, Angela stood up and left. Angela blamed Matt for not helping the weak when they needed it. Angela thought that lawyers were on the side of justice, but they were no different from the heartless people in society. It is true that you shouldn't rely on others when you can do it yourself. After leaving, Angela went to Muse's shelter, but Angela's stupid decision cost her dearly. Muse suddenly came from behind and knocked Angela unconscious. He began to drain her blood. Hector's wife did not see her niece come home, so he called Matt. Matt heard and knew for sure that she had gone to find Muse. The dire situation forced Matt to break his rules this time. Matt decided not to call the police, but to deal with Muse himself. Matt put on his Daredevil costume. Then Daredevil quickly went to Muse's shelter. The strange sound made Muse look out to check, but the moment he revealed his face, Daredevil hit him. After a long time without fighting, Daredevil not only did not weaken but was even more agile. Daredevil continuously punched the killer in the face, causing him to cower in pain. Daredevil saw Angela dying on the operating table, so he ran to pull out the blood suction tube and then continued to beat Muse. The murderer appeared extremely weak in front of Daredevil. Daredevil was beating Muse when he suddenly heard Angela's heartbeat weaker. Daredevil knocked Muse out and ran to give Angela artificial respiration. Fortunately, after a while of trying, Matt was able to save her, but when he looked up to check, the bastard Muse had escaped. In another development, Wilson was also returning to his true nature. He was angry because his elegant appearance could not do anything. Wilson returned to the basement where Adam was imprisoned to vent his anger. Wilson knew that Adam was weaker than him, so he threw an axe at Adam to fight him. However, Wilson, who was many times larger, immediately beat Adam violently. Then he continued to return with a bloody face. The next morning, the news that Angela was saved by Daredevil spread all over the newspapers. Daredevil's return made Wilson extremely angry because it not only broke the commitment of the two, but also went against his ambition to eliminate superheroes. Wilson urged the police to speed up the investigation. At all costs, he had to catch Muse before Daredevil. After a period of in-depth analysis, the female detective quickly identified Muse's true identity. Muse's real name was Cooper, a person with signs of severe mental illness in the past. Cooper was suspected of being the one who had the heart to kill his taekwondo teacher in his own home. Cooper loved painting but was forced by his parents to practice martial arts. That was also the reason why he developed a rebellious mentality. Coincidentally, Cooper was a loyal fan of Heather. He had read all of her books and was currently being treated at her clinic. After a while of chatting, Cooper did not hesitate to reveal his true identity. Cooper saw the female doctor's face showing fear, so he immediately went to comfort her and asked her quietly if she was thinking if she could run to the door in time. Heather tried to struggle, but her strength was definitely not enough to compete with Cooper. In another development, Matt returned to Muse's basement to investigate and immediately discovered something unusual. Through the feeling of his fingertips, Matt realized that there were many paintings of Heather here. Wilson's task force also discovered this. They immediately informed Wilson, but in the end were still one step behind Matt. Matt quickly arrived at Heather's office. Matt appeared at the exact moment Muse was preparing to take Heather's blood to paint. A fierce battle took place between Daredevil and Muse once again. Although Muse was very good at martial arts, he was still no match for Matt. Matt was so strong that Muse's blood gradually covered the canvas he had prepared in advance. Meanwhile, Heather panicked, so she picked up Muse's gun and shot him dead. Matt was surprised and didn't know what to do. Matt really wanted to help Heather, but the task force appeared downstairs. When they rushed in, only Heather was was unconscious, and Muse's body was lying motionless. Looking at the chaotic scene in the task force room, it was certain that Daredevil had arrived. However, this information would be detrimental to Wilson's policy, so Wilson decided to deceive the people. In front of the media and press, Wilson announced that the person who killed the sick murderer Muse was his task force. This statement certainly helped Wilson win the hearts of the people. However, there were still many people who were not manipulated by him. Typically, journalist BB. She still firmly believed that Daredevil was the one who carried out justice. Daniel heard that and threatened BB that if she dared to post about Daredevil now, Wilson would definitely destroy her future. BB was also scared after hearing that. She knew that it was not wise to confront Wilson now, so she chose to write an article praising him. But now Wilson had to deal with another problem: the thug Luca. A few days ago, Luca came to Vanessa to convince her to help him kill Wilson. Luca said that Vanessa was the one who deserved to sit at the top of the underworld. Wilson's return had caused chaos. Luca had to destroy Wilson to help the underworld develop again. Right after Wilson appeared on TV, Vanessa told Luca about Wilson's current location. It seemed that Vanessa would betray Wilson, but that was not the case, because at the moment, Luca pointed a gun at Wilson's head. He was shot dead by Wilson's loyal subordinates on the spot. Vanessa had successfully built trust in Wilson's eyes. It was time for their relationship to return to the way it was. The next morning, Wilson took Vanessa to his favorite bunker. There, Vanessa met Adam again in a miserable state. Vanessa had to choose between two options. One was to unlock and release Adam, who was not at fault in this incident. The other was to heartlessly shoot him dead in front of Wilson. At first, Vanessa begged Wilson to spare Adam's life, but failed. And then what had to happen happened. Vanessa decided to choose the second option. Thereby, she erased all the sins she had committed in the past. Meanwhile, Matt and Heather were arguing over their disagreement on the issue of superheroes. Heather had a grudge against superheroes like Daredevil because she thought they had increased the violent ideology in society. It affected so many people, including her. Until now, Heather still could not forget the feeling of holding a gun and killing Muse. Heather supports Wilson's ideals despite Matt's constant reminder that he is not as simple as she thinks. At this moment, Buck suddenly appears at the door. Buck comes to send Heather an invitation to attend the festival to celebrate Wilson's new project. Although he does not directly invite Matt, the letter still tells her to bring her friend along. In another development, Poindexter has just been transferred by the prison guard to the general prison. This is a place no different from hell for someone with his hands tied like him. This information is immediately sent to Matt. It seems that Matt will have a party to celebrate, but no, because the one who transferred Poindexter to the general prison is Wilson. This makes Matt suspicious of everything. He suddenly gets angry because he suddenly realizes that things are not as simple as he thought. A question suddenly appears in Matt's mind. Why does Wilson want to kill Poindexter? Is Wilson the one who sent that bastard to kill Nelson? Matt asks to meet Poindexter. Matt realizes that Poindexter killing Nelson must be someone's request. Wilson is most likely the one behind this. But as soon as Matt met Poindexter, he said that he would not say anything if he did not get out of here. Of course, Matt would not fall for this bastard's trap. Matt banged Poindexter's head a few times on the table to calm his anger, and then stood up to leave. However, this was a good opportunity for Poindexter, because with just a broken tooth, successfully killed the prison guard. Then he stole the card and quietly escaped. In another development, Daniel was unexpectedly promoted by Wilson to be the deputy mayor in charge of communications. Wilson's action was mainly aimed at Sheila. He wanted her to know what benefits a person who always obeyed his orders would receive. That night, Wilson organized a ball exclusively for the upper class, also to ask for donations from several billionaires in New York. Wilson's first target was Derek, the billionaire who had openly challenged him in their previous meeting. Thanks to his extensive network of relationships, Wilson knew Derek's true identity. Derek was Softman, a superhero in the city. With this information, Wilson gained the upper hand in the negotiations. Derek had no choice but to pay Wilson to avoid going to jail. Heather and Matt were also present at the party. However, the relationship between the two was having some problems. One wanted to talk, while the other was only focused on eavesdropping on Wilson's conversation. At the party, female journalist BB secretly met Commissioner Carlo. BB confessed that she followed Wilson with the purpose of discovering her uncle's death. Carlo knew that very well, but now he couldn't do anything to Wilson. Carlo and BB made a secret promise that they would support each each other, and by all means they had to expose the evil face of the bastard Wilson. Poindexter, after successfully escaping from prison, was also present at the party. It seemed like he was targeting someone. Receiving the news from the warden, Buck immediately ran to inform Wilson and his wife. Vanessa was shocked when she heard it. She wanted to tell Wilson the truth but was stopped by him because he knew Matt was eavesdropping. If she accidentally said something wrong, everything would definitely be disrupted. But Matt, with his intelligence, soon understood everything. Matt knew that Vanessa was the one who hired Poindexter to kill Nelson. At the same time, the assassin had reached the second floor. He successfully defeated the guard and stole the sniper rifle. Surprisingly, the target he was aiming for was Wilson. At the moment Poindexter pulled the trigger, Matt suddenly rushed forward to take the bullet for Wilson and was seriously injured. Just as Matt had guessed a year ago, Vanessa had come to Poindexter to hire him to kill Nelson. It turns out that Nelson was defending a thief at the time, and the evidence he has is likely to expose Vanessa's illegal business. Poindexter already had a grudge against Wilson. However, in order to get out of the mental hospital, he agreed to help her deal with Nelson. Back in the present, Matt has been hospitalized. Poindexter is currently missing. As soon as he wakes up, Matt calls Kirsten and tells her everything. He asks to leave to find out about the lawsuit Nelson participated in. However, his injuries are too severe, so neither Kirsten nor Heather agree to let him leave the hospital. Meanwhile, Wilson is telling Vanessa all his intentions. It turns out that he became mayor largely to promote his business. Vanessa has transferred millions of dollars through the Red Hook Court. When Wilson becomes mayor, the profits will increase tenfold. But for that to happen, Wilson must eliminate all the superheroes. He used his position as mayor to cut off the power to the entire city and allowed his special forces to operate freely. Now that the bridges were blocked and the tunnels were closed, all superheroes would be hunted down and arrested regardless of who they were. Of course, Matt was no exception. Since Matt had just saved Wilson from death, he would give Matt special treatment. Wilson sent Buck to assassinate Matt while the city was in chaos. But Matt, with his extremely sensitive ears, heard Buck's strange footsteps. Thanks to that, Matt managed to escape for a back moment. On this side, Sheila was assigned by Wilson to find disloyal subordinates. As soon as he stepped out of the door, Sheila encountered Commissioner Carlo. Carlo tried to convince Sheila to join his team. Carlo was the one who brought down Wilson and exposed his extremely toxic ideology to the entire population. After escaping from the hospital, Matt returned home and met Frank again. Frank was asked by someone to help Matt get out of here safely. They all realized that Matt was being targeted by Wilson because there were many fake police officers waiting downstairs in the building. Frank was sure that they were crazy fans of the Punisher. This was his chance to kill them all. The moment the fake police officers rushed inside, Daredevil suddenly fell from the ceiling. Then he attacked continuously, causing the whole group to fall to the ground. Frank also put on a shirt with a skull on it. He brutally killed all the bastards who dared to impersonate him. Two people with two completely opposite fighting styles. One tried not to kill anyone. The other was extremely brutal. After Frank had finished off all the fake police officers, he picked up the bullet casing from the floor and realized that the leader was the one who killed Hector. Hatred now filled Matt's mind. Seeing this, Frank urged Matt to kill him quickly, but Matt is still Matt. Matt is still a good lawyer, so he can't be as cruel as Frank. Matt even stopped Frank from killing the leader. The two were arguing when they suddenly heard the sound of a grenade. Without saying much, they hugged each other and jumped down. A moment later, Karen drove up. It turned out that she was the one who asked Frank to protect Matt. Matt then told Karen everything about Nelson, so the two decided to go to the archives to find out all the truth. Frank, as usual, decided to fight alone. He stole a policeman's walkie-talkie and knew where they would gather. Meanwhile, Wilson's Safe Streets initiative was becoming extreme because even less dangerous criminals like petty thieves were being shot dead. To cover it up, the fake cops just put on a mask so they could use the excuse of dealing with superheroes to shoot freely. Back to Matt and Karen, they have now found the case file that Nelson was involved in. Nelson's argument for the case is as follows. Due to the unique nature of Red Hook Harbor, no crime was committed there, so the court has no jurisdiction to prosecute his client. There is also the Red Hook Charter. That charter states that Red Hook is a free port. It is exempt from the jurisdiction of the city or even the country. Vanessa used Red Hook to launder money legally, and then Wilson even planned to build a complex there. If that happens, Red Hook Harbor will become a sacred place, a place where all evils become legal. At this time, Frank rushed into the enemy base alone. He single-handedly assassinated almost all the thugs disguised as police. But no matter how strong Frank was, he could not overcome an army fully equipped with guns. The fake policemen wore shirts with the Punisher symbol on them. They brazenly stood in front of Frank and claimed to be his loyal fans. Powell, as the leader, confided that everyone here admired Frank. They wanted to accompany him. Frank could only laugh scornfully and scold them as a bunch of clowns in a circus. They did not even understand the pain and loss he had gone through. When Frank refused, Powell ordered a tall and muscular man to punch him a few times, but Frank remained calm and continued to curse them severely with his head held high. On this side, Sheila had betrayed Carlo. In order to maintain her position, she recorded the conversation between herself and Carlo and gave it to Wilson. Wilson immediately sent a fake police officer to pick up Carlo, who had been previously eliminated by him for corruption. Carlo only had time to curse Wilson that he had never escaped from the Kingpin's personality. Carlo was then tortured to death by Wilson. At the same time, Karen and Matt were outside the Red Hook port. Matt wanted to rush in to check but was immediately stopped by Karen. Matt was seriously injured, so he certainly wouldn't be able to leave here alive. Now, to confront Wilson, Matt needed an army of kind and intelligent people. The next morning, Heather was invited by Wilson and appointed as the city's mental health commissioner, so he successfully seduced Matt's lover. Through that, he grasped the blind lawyer's weakness. Wilson also announced to step up the campaign to make the streets safer by extending the curfew to 8 p.m. In the near future, he will also issue martial law. In another development, Daredevil is born again. He accepts that he has both darkness and light, resentment and tolerance. He summons a group of superheroes and declares that this city belongs to them, not Wilson. Wilson reveals that he is imprisoning many superheroes in the basement, including Frank. But suddenly, after a while, Frank lured the guard to his place. Then Frank killed him and took Key. Once the Punisher returns with Daredevil, the balance of power between the two sides will return to the balance point, and there will certainly be more fierce and tense battles. The movie ends here. Thank you for your interest in watching. Goodbye, and see you again.